in 1937, because we had all of this political strife and the 30s and 40s, they're lynching Mexicanos. We're talking about still talking about Reconstruction.
Yeah, this post-depression.
Right? Yeah. We're talking about black jazz musicians they brought into the mix, and it's like, guys, again, the jazz music was such a big deal.
There goes the villainization that I'm talking about.
Well, because they didn't want all that rock and roll and that jazz, that devil music.
They don't want it. They just don't want their children involved in these kinds of like counterculture kind of ways,
because what's so crazy about that is that's all a brainwashing, because
100%.
The plant is truly a nutraceutical. Like it does a lot of
The plant is the
things.
victim here.
Exactly. And the people are the victims, because we used to have this over the counter. You can grow this in your backyard.
Yeah.
Know exactly what's in it. Know that you didn't use pesticides.
Yeah.
Harvest it and treat your depression, your anxiety, your migraine, whatever the ailment is. You can probably find a solution using this plant or some other natural remedy.
Right.
And I'm all about, I believe in docs. I believe in science. And I understand for some conditions, pharmaceuticals are necessary.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, that is not necessary. And the reason that this prohibition, I think, continues is because of alcohol, tobacco, and pharmaceutical industry making sure that the narrative that it is a dangerous drug,
of course,
for degenerate people pervades what is going to end up happening. So what do we have right now in Texas? We're facing like SB3, which is
talk about that. I don't know what that
bill.
is. What is that? Talk to us.
SB3, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick introduced SB3. Actually, he hasn't introduced it. No one's seen the text. I even looked this morning to see if there was anything before coming to visit with you. We haven't seen this bill yet, so it's not been written. They're already going through SB2, which is the school voucher bill.
Okay.
SB3 is Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Senator Charles Perry, I think, will be the author on this one. It's a bill to ban all THC in Texas.
Oh, wow.
Well, what do we have right now in Texas? We have a low dose medical program that is really inefficient, that the legislators have really, because of the cap that they've put on it, it can't actually serve a lot of patients, because you're not going to pay $70 for a gummy that is so low dose, it's not helpful.
Right.
And also dosage really depends on the individual. Like I could probably eat like a whole bag of these and be fine. Do I recommend that for everybody? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. Like most people should start with half of a gummy. It depends on your body system. Yeah, your tolerance level and your system. Like there are studies that were done recently where we're finding a correlation between if you have PTSD, we all have this thing in our body called an endocannabinoid system. So we actually all have a body system, like your cardiovascular system. We all have one called the endocannabinoid system. Whether you like cannabis or not, physically, you have an endocannabinoid system. Cannabinoids are like released in breast milk, like after birth when you're feeding the baby. They're receiving cannabinoids as a part of the bonding process with mom and baby. It helps, it facilitates oxytocin transfers and all of this stuff. It's all part of that. So cool. We have a system in our body designed for cannabinoids. What they're finding with PTSD is that those people are exhibiting an abundance of receptors for the CB1, CB2 receptor, which is what THC activates. They're finding that those people who have extreme bouts of depression or PTSD have more receptors, which would mean that if they have more receptors but no chemical, then they have a deficiency likely of cannabinoids. And that by treating that using cannabis, giving people cannabinoids, it alleviates a lot of the symptoms. So that's probably why I can eat a whole bunch of these and still be level, because I physiologically need more than what someone else might, because they don't have all of those open receptors.
Wow.
So there's still a lot of science that we need to develop. And the longer we have prohibition and the stigma, especially because in Latino culture, coming out about being in this industry was terrifying, really, as a Latina more than anything else, because they made it so bad for us. Like They convinced us that we were criminals, that if we participated in any consumption of this medicine, that we were criminals, that we were degenerates, that we were hoodlums, and that it could be the end of our life. And I do know that for some people who did fall into that world, yes, but that has nothing to do with the plant. That has everything to do with
legislation, political structure,
and also that
system.
has to do with if the criminal system.
Yeah.
If you oppress the people so much so that there is no way forward for them economically, and they can't put bread on the table for their children, I don't know any one person who really wouldn't break the law to put bread on the table for their children. Sure. Now, should you? No, but it's much easier to judge when you have resources than when you're in the position.
Correct.
So, and that lifestyle leads to that kind of nefarious characters, actors who are just in it for money, and that's not about the plant. That's about drug trafficking.
Right.
That's about underground operations. That's about illegal activities.
I can speak to that a little bit, because that's what I like to call the revolving door of pain. Is really what I label it as, right? Because you're speaking to circumstances that may make somebody
make a choice.
Yeah, that would make somebody make a bad choice, right? And what I say at that point is, if I peel back the layer of what is the thing that caused somebody to make this bad choice? Lack of resources, lack of opportunity. But then you also get this really weird thing where it all comes out. This is the artist in me. This is why you'll probably see that this is where I think that this is my function. It all revolves around pain. People feel pain. People don't know where that pain comes from. People feel pain for a multitude of reasons. It's not just the government incited, oh, we're oppressing you. It's a multitude of reasons. I made bad decisions. I had a baby early, or whatever. That's why I call it the revolving door. It's like the revolving door of pain. You don't know what to do with that pain. You have to figure out a way to either self-medicate, whatever. And you get caught in this cycle, and then afterwards you have to make decisions based on the circumstances that could have been alleviated by a multitude of factors, the government being one of them, or at least politics and laws being part of it, right? Whether you have an empathetic law versus a law that's meant to criminalize,
most folks
right?
have a boot on their neck,
right?
And that gets tough to navigate.
Yeah. So I register all of that through people are in pain, and we need to alleviate pain, right? And that's not a very that's not a very hard concept to understand, because right now there is a growing constant effort to paint the white community that's affected by opiates as we're just in pain. You know what I mean? They don't get kind of
they're
villainized.
Not criminals.
Right. They're not criminals.
Victims.
They're victims of them
criminals.
being in pain, right?
Right.
And that in essence is the biggest crux that I have with the portrayal of drug use in this country, not just for Latinos, but for the Black community.
And the opioid crisis being caused by the pharmaceutical industry.
It's not our fault.
That's a mental health issue.
Yeah, it's a mental health issue.
And yeah, it is.
And it is.
So
I agree.
is this other
Correct.
thing, which, by the way, is not an issue, because this is not a dangerous drug.
Right.
You've made it a dangerous.
Right. And to be fair, I want to be a little. I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here, but I want to be very clear that it worked. The propagandization.
Oh, it totally worked.
And it worked. Like, my mother used to say, "No te vuelvas marihuano." Like, don't become that kind of a person. Like, it was the thing that people were scared of. And I think looking back on it now, when I've asked my mom, she can tell me of when the first time that she in Mexico, when she felt how they used to use cannabis and things like that. So she knows about it. In the traditional ways. But the propaganda worked only because she was scared. She was in pain that I would end up arrested. Behind bars. Yeah, you know what I mean?
So they used this thing that the community was using to heal itself and criminalized it. So then the fear, truth be told, coming out and working on the stigma in the Latino community has zero to do with the plant. Mm-hmm. It has everything to do with undoing the fear of arrest.
Correct.
And at this stage, it doesn't matter if you're consuming a plant. The fear of arrest is if you're presenting enough or not. And I know I say that from a place of privilege. But my grandfather, look, let's just talk about what's really happening right now with the documentation and being undocumented. Sure. And then being called illegal or alien to this land, especially as a Tahana, it blows my mind because most of those folks are indigenous. And we're like tripping over, well, Native American Navajo people are being picked up by ICE or being questioned by ICE, but they're a Native American, the outrage.
Right.
And I want to be like, well, my brothers, I'm glad that the Navajo Nation would stand with us, I hope, because so are we, indigenous.
Right.
Just because you want to put a label on it, Mexican, because of a country, the French, the Spanish.
Nationality.
All of these borders were all drawn after these people. We were already here.